The scene was already electric before Denzel Washington even took the stage at Morehouse University. Families in the crowd were buzzing, graduates were shifting nervously in their gowns, and the air was thick with pride and anticipation. Nobody expected that what began as a commencement speech would transform into one of the most viral cultural flashpoints of the year. Denzel stepped up to the podium, adjusted the mic, and with that trademark gravitas, dropped words that sliced sharper than any movie monologue he's ever delivered. Some wear the skin but not the soul. They're puppets dressed as leaders, reading scripts written by their donors. That line alone ricocheted across social media like a thunderclap. Within minutes, Twitter threads dissected it, Instagram Reels clipped it, and TikTok debates raged about who he was targeting. Students in the audience erupted in applause, and professors who've sat through decades of commencement speeches found themselves standing and clapping with tears in their eyes. This wasn't polite inspiration. This was a cultural gut punch. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And here's the thing, Denzel never mentioned any names. He didn't have to. The internet filled in the blanks for him. Commentators, activists, and everyday people quickly drew lines toward certain politicians who've long been accused of being mouthpieces for power structures instead of advocates for their own communities. Chief among them, Senator Tim Scott. If Denzel lit the match, the crowd and the commentariat poured gasoline on it. The speech instantly became less about graduation and more about a larger conversation. Who really represents the people and who just pretends? It was messy, powerful, and impossible to ignore. But as with any moment that grabs the national imagination, someone was bound to feel personally attacked. That someone was Tim Scott. By the time evening rolled around, Scott was sitting across from a Fox News host, visibly bristling. He didn't mince words. Denzel Washington is a fool, an uneducated Hollywood actor who doesn't understand the first thing about public service, policy, or sacrifice. He plays leaders, I am one. The comment landed like a hammer, not just dismissive but dripping with contempt. It was clear he wasn't just responding to a celebrity speech. He felt cornered, humiliated, and desperate to claw back ground. The problem? His attack wasn't just against Denzel. It came across as an insult to everyone who had cheered, clapped, or been moved by that speech. And those numbers were massive. The internet lit up again, this time angrier and louder. Memes flew. Side-by-side clips compared Denzel's towering presence to Scott's defensive rant. One viral tweet said, "Imagine thinking you can come for Malcolm X and Alonzo from Training Day combined." Another quipped, "Tim Scott tried to drag Denzel, but he forgot Denzel has Oscars, respect, and the entire black community behind him. This is not a fight he can win." Suddenly, it wasn't just about politics, it was about cultural legacy, respect, and the very idea of who gets to critique whom. If Scott thought he could belittle Denzel into silence, he had vastly underestimated the cultural footprint of a man whose words carry more weight than many political speeches combined. But Denzel didn't fire back immediately. That's what made his eventual response so devastating. He waited. He let the noise build. He let the internet do what it does best: amplify, remix, and roast. By the time he sat down with Trevor Noah on a podcast days later, anticipation was sky high. People wanted to know, would Denzel clap back with fury, or shrug it off with that trademark cool? The answer was neither, and yet somehow both. Trevor leaned in and asked gently about the insult. Denzel smirked, leaned back, and dropped one of those one-liners that will be quoted for years. "You know, I never mentioned anyone's name, but if the shoe fits, polish it." The podcast studio fell silent. Trevor laughed nervously, clearly realizing the brilliance of the remark. But Denzel wasn't done. With icy precision, he added, "I've played kings, criminals, and civil rights heroes, but I've never had to pretend to care about my people. Some men act in movies, others act in office." That line detonated across the internet like a cultural atom bomb. It was sharp, it was layered, and it was impossible to misinterpret. Denzel had just redefined the entire playing field. The brilliance of his comeback wasn't in volume or rage. It was in calm authority. He didn't yell, didn't name names, didn't stoop to insult. He simply drew a line between performance and authenticity, and dared people to decide for themselves which side Tim Scott was on. And here's the kicker. You could almost feel the air leave the room when Trevor paused, realizing just how much weight those words carried. For a man who has spent his life embodying characters, Denzel had made one thing perfectly clear. There's a difference between acting and living. One wins awards, the other earns respect. The ripple effects were immediate. Political commentators scrambled to analyze the fallout. Activists framed it as a cultural awakening. Even late-night hosts couldn't resist weighing in, with one joking, "Tim Scott tried to battle Denzel Washington in a war of words. That's like challenging Michael Jordan to a pickup game and forgetting he still has his sneakers." The story dominated trending lists, with hashtags like #DenzelMicDrop and #PuppetPolitics taking over timelines. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a conversation about representation, authenticity, and the responsibility that comes with power. But the real magic of the moment is what it revealed about the power of narrative. Denzel didn't just outwit Tim Scott, he exposed a vulnerability in political culture itself. People are tired of leaders who seem scripted, disconnected, and beholden to forces beyond their communities. They're hungry for authenticity, even when it comes from unexpected places, like a Hollywood star. And maybe that's the real reason Scott lashed out. Because the applause Denzel received wasn't just for a clever line. It was for articulating something people already felt deep down but didn't always have the words for. Here's the irony. Tim Scott wanted to frame himself as the real leader in contrast to an actor. But the more he talked, the more he sounded like he was reading a script of his own. Denzel, meanwhile, reminded people that truth delivered with conviction doesn't need a teleprompter. And the people noticed. Comment threads were filled with posts from folks saying they felt prouder, more inspired, and more motivated to demand more from their leaders. That's the kind of cultural moment you can't buy, spin, or manufacture. It either resonates or it doesn't. So what happens next? That's the question simmering beneath it all. Will Scott double down and risk alienating even more people by trying to fight a cultural icon? Or will he quietly retreat, hoping the news cycle moves on? Will Denzel lean further into political commentary? Or will he simply drop the mic and move on to his next project? Content with the impact already made. Whatever the case, one thing is certain. The lines have been drawn, and the conversation is far from over. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Sometimes the most powerful form of leadership isn't holding office, drafting laws, or making speeches filled with statistics. Sometimes it's speaking plainly, cutting through the noise, and saying the thing that everyone feels but hasn't heard articulated. That's what Denzel did. He reminded us that authenticity is magnetic, that truth still matters, and that leadership without soul is just performance. So here's my call to you. Don't just sit back and watch this play out like another viral moment. Think about what it means in your own life. Where are the places you've accepted scripts instead of authenticity? Who are the puppets in your world? And what would it mean to demand more? And maybe most importantly, are you willing to step up and be the one who speaks truth, even when it makes people uncomfortable? Denzel's mic drop wasn't just about Tim Scott. It was about all of us. The next move is yours. Would you like me to expand this to meet the full 3,000-word target in one continuous flow? Or would you prefer I break it into segments so you can guide the pacing like we've done with your other projects?